Welcome back. This week we're going to do a craft fur version of the Clouser Minnow. Not a whole lot changes on this one. I'm going to add a few things here and there just to flash it up a little bit. There are a ton of variations of this pattern, but for the most part everything stays true to the original. The original being with bucktail. But without rambling on a bunch here and speeding this up so the dog doesn't interrupt like she did last week, I'm going to try and get through this one pretty quick because I think she's taking a nap right now, so I may get lucky. Alright, that looks pretty good. Let me get zoomed in just a little bit more there, and we'll go ahead and get started. The hook on this one's an MFC 7008 size 6. It's the 4X long down-eyed streamer hook. And I'm just going to build a quick thread base here, open loop this to the back, right to where the barb of the hook comes up, and then I'm going to take this back to about the third way point on the hook. When I did the original video on this one with bucktail, I had the eye of the hook a little bit too far forward, and there are a few other things that I got ahead of myself on and messed up a little bit, but we'll make sure that we correct those for this one and speak through it as to why it is the way that it is. So when I tied the original, I tied them like I do anything that has dumbbell eyes, like a Dungeon, Boogeyman, October. They sit right about where the scissors are, and the reason that they're there that far forward, it puts the weight forward on the fly, and it gives you a little bit more of a jigging action. The way that we want this one, or the way that Bob Clouser designed it, was it to be retrieved more laterally than it was a jig. In order to achieve that, we're pushing these back to about the third waypoint. That way it sort of balances the fly out, so you still get some weight to the fly, but it keeps it a more lateral retrieve. And then we're just going to go ahead and get these secured. There you can see where we have the eyes sitting, and the eyes are going to stay on top of this hook. That way it swims inverted like that. So make sure that everything's lined up well. Now that it is, I'm just going to take a quick touch of zap right over the top, one on the bottom, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to make a few more securing wraps on this. So I'm going to go over the top and then around the eyes, but not touching the hook. So it should secure us really well. Now, this one I'm going to do today in tan and yellow, or tan and a sunburst yellow. I think Caroline calls it a golden yellow. Let me make sure I get that right. Yeah, golden yellow. If you're looking for this in the shops, this is a golden yellow, and it matches up almost perfect with their sunburst yellow. There we go. I'm just going to take a little bit of craft fur here, have everything cleaned out. I'm going to run this through the comb, get rid of all the junk right there, all the stuff that's going to make life difficult for tying this in. And because I want yellow to be my bottom color, I'm going to tie this in on the top, because remember, it's going to be inverted as we're looking at it right now. So I'm just going to take this, continue to clean it up. I'm going to even up the tips on this as best as possible. I don't want them like straight even. It doesn't make for the best look. But I want them even as possible, but still to have a nice taper going toward the back. So what we're going to do on this one is I want my tail section, if you will, to be about 1 1/4 times the length of my hook. So I'm going to measure this out, and right now we're sitting at about 1 1/2, And because this yellow is only going to the eyes and not forward, I'm just going to grab right where I have the 1.5, and the difference is going to be 1.25, roughly. It's nothing scientific, but usually it's pretty close. So now I'm just going to cut that off at an angle. That's a pretty sloppy cut. Cut that off at an angle, and I'm going to get this secured in, and then I'm just going to run this all the way to the point of my hook. Now I'm going to make some good secure wraps, open loop, secure, open loop, secure. Now you can see that tail kind of flails out a little bit on me. Has a nice look to it, and it's roughly 1.25 times, maybe a little bit longer. Maybe a little bit longer, but I want a little bit coming off on that tail. So we'll say between 1.5 and 1.25. How's that? Just kind of clean this craft fur up a little bit. It's not going to matter here in a minute. There we go. Clean that stuff up a little bit, and then I'm going to move this to the front. I'm going to do a quick half hitch, and then we're going to do something a little bit different with this body. We're going to add a little bit of flash. This is a really subtle flash. This material right here, this is the olive version of it, but this is from Superfly, and it's Super Dub yarn, and you can see this stuff has some neat little flash to it, but it's still really thin, and you're able to build a nice body with this. This stuff is great for caddis casings, caddis larvae, caddis emergers, whatever it may be. This stuff's phenomenal for it. But for this application, I'm just going to lay this down, and I'm going to have it build a little bit more of a body and something that's going to shine through just slightly on this pattern. So then don't go getting crazy with your whip finishes here, because it's not the best stuff to whip. It's not the best stuff to whip finish with. Has a little bit of a memory from being on the spool. Get a couple on there, and I'll just throw a quick half hitch on this. There we go. Quick half hitch, and we're on our way. Get my gel spun back on there before it decides to all unravel on me. There we go. We'll get that clipped out. And there you can see we've got that nice little taper on the tail. We've got a little bit of flash on the body. Now we're going to flip this on the opposite side. Got a little bit of blood coming through there. Oh well. Got myself a little bit. I'm going to take 2 to 3 strands of gold holographic Flashaboo. Maybe 4. Shoot, that's 5. I got a mess there. And I'm just going to take this Flashaboo, and I'm going to tie this right on the top here and bring it back to my eyes. And this is just going to flow free. It's going to go right down the center for the most part. Cut it short of the end of your tail. And that's just going to be a little bit of internal flash. It's going to all be covered up here momentarily by our tan craft fur. And I'm just picking some of this out. I know you can't see it because I'm working on the bench right now. I'm picking some of this tan out, getting a nice little selection here. And I'll explain this a little bit more once I get this cut. Someone's not happy out there. Someone's not happy. Alright, so I got my section cut, and I'm just going to clean this out. I'll explain this once I get this secured and tied in what I did with this craft fur that I found makes it a little bit easier to work with. Makes it a little more consistent as well. So, a couple in there that are a little bit longer that I want to get out. There we go. So now I'm just going to lay this over top. I'm going to set it to the side first, make sure that I'm happy with the overall measurement on this. And I'm going to set this on the top. Come back, cut this at an angle again. These scissors aren't the best for cutting at an angle. They're a little bit on the stubby side, but that's alright. Just hack away at it until I get it where I want it. Now, I'm going to capture this on the back end. Just making nice loose wraps here. And before I get too far to the front, I'm going to clean this up. There we go. And then just some nice clean wraps on top of this. There you have that nice little transition, or that nice little taper on the nose that you're looking for. Now just peel all this stuff back. You want your top color to be a little bit longer than the bottom color. A few strands going around the barb there. You want your top color, or your top color, to be a little bit longer than the bottom color. And you can see where it just slightly comes past that. The yellow inherently takes over this pattern a little bit just because it's so vibrant and bright. But with enough tan on the top of it, you still get that nice cover. So when it gets wet, it just kind of slicks back all the way, and it really gives a nice little transition, really. So now we got that little bit of internal flash. You can see I got more sticking out on this side than I do the camera side. But once again, I mean, once that gets wet, that's when it's really going to shine through on the other side. So now I'm just going to take this, I'm going to get a quick whip finish. We have a nice clean eye. And then if you want to, you can go back to this. I will for this one. We'll go back to this little bit of flash. And we'll just cover this up slightly. Make sure, yep, top looks good. And I'm going to give this one quick half hitch is all that one's going to be able to make. And go back over top of this again just to secure my final wraps. Come on. 1, 2. There we go. That blends in pretty well actually with the color that I have for the what the heck is it again? The Super Dub yarn. Kind of blends in nice. Now if I were using like a black or an olive or whatever and I go over top of that, I'd have to touch it up with the marker a little bit. But for the most part that winds up turning out pretty good there with the tan. Now, back to what I was explaining. Make sure that that sits right. Back to what I was explaining real quick with this craft fur. Give this a quick spin, that way you can get a look at the finished product on that before I talk about the craft fur. I'll zoom out a little bit and then you're able to see what I'm doing. I've found that it's easier if you lay this craft fur down on the bench like this, and I'll try and do it this way, that way the camera's able to see it. and then you just take your scissors and make a nice straight line right through here, and then all this material that stands up, you'll see a nice clean break on the back side of that material. Zoom in again, zoom in, zoom out. We're just making a mess out of this. You'll see a nice clean break. Get in focus there. You'll see a nice clean break to where you can see the actual, well, it's not a hide, but for all intents and purposes, that's what we relate it to. It's a hide, but that's where you have that nice section right there, and then you just take your scissors, run right as close to the bottom as possible, and then that way, how I used to do it, I used to just come in here, I'd grab a clump like this, and I would cut, and then there'd be a chunk, and then I would have long and short fibers intermixed everywhere, and it would just be a mess. Doing it this way, you get more consistency throughout your selection of fibers, and it seems to really help out. Makes a cleaner profile, or makes a cleaner taper, a cleaner bundle, if you will, on the actual pattern. So that should be the end of this one. I don't think I missed anything that I wanted to talk about. I probably did. I'll do another one later maybe, but I'll probably forget again though. If you guys have any questions or comments, as always, leave them with me. I'll get back to you. But thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next week.